Hi everyone. Today we're going to be talking about architecture and how
People are going to be like, what the hell? This makes no sense.
It'll make sense when we're talking about
That's
it because
true.
we're talking about meaning but in physical form. And I think, what's the thing that we first talked about yesterday? It was Arthur's Round Table.
Yeah, because in essence, we're trying to like kind of dovetail Adlerian theory with architecture, and this is something that, well, I guess we're like weirdos in the sense that we have.
We can Adlerize anything.
Yeah, no, we can't.
It's like
And
jazzercise, but
so this is just, I think this is the idea. Sometimes Adler gets a little stuck in a clinician's office or in like books or things like that. And that's, of course, those are perfectly wonderful places for Adler's theory to be. But I think one of the things that maybe has kind of hampered our theory at times is that it gets, like we haven't connected it to these other aspects of life. Like if you think about Freudian theory, you know, there's like all this literary analysis that gets done using Freudian theory that's had this massive effect on liberal arts education, and so it kind of hangs around, even though it's
and Dali, right? He like did a bunch of stuff,
Yeah.
Freud stuff, which I felt a little jealous that he didn't meet Adler in the same way, but imagine what it would have looked like.
Yeah, really, I love his artwork, and so anyway, so like to connect architectural theory and some things like, which by the way, we're not architects and we don't, so like we're going to talk about architectural theory in a very, very loose way. So I beg of you, if you're an architect, don't be, like go easy on us.
Or maybe just
here,
don't watch this one because it might it might hurt.
Just skip. So to come back to the round table, when we're talking about meaning in physical form, the idea is that it's like architects and designers when they put together a design, it's not just like, oh, well, this kind of looks interesting to me. I mean, there is an aesthetic component, obviously, but there's also people don't design objects; they design an experience. And that goes for architecture, but it also goes for something like a table. And so if we think about King Arthur's Round Table, this idea that there is no head of the table, and this is a signal of equality among individuals so when Arthur sits with his knights at this round table, he's communicating something meaningful about the dynamic that exists between him and his knights.
Yeah, it's like collaboration over hierarchy. And everybody's expected to contribute to like the greater whole, like of the community and everything like that. So, and they have some like code of honor. Did I make that up? The knights, where it's like they have to be like loyal and courageous and all these things, where it's like this idea of personal responsibility that they take on in order to like move things forward in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that part too.
So and this branches to architecture as well. It's not just like, it doesn't just take form in like tables or something like this. There's a building that comes to mind, Daniel Libeskind, who's a really fantastic architect in my opinion. I really like his stuff. He designed the Freedom Tower in New York and a lot of
trains going up.
like a lot of, I mean, very, very famous buildings. But he designed, I believe it's the Jewish Museum in Berlin. Boy, this is just terrible. I can't remember exactly what it is, but he designed it in part.
All the things that he did on the spot. How dare
Well,
you?
just to mention it, I should have done my homework. But he designed it in part so that you would get a little bit lost in there, and that's on purpose. Like again, it's not just like, oh, well, this is kind of a cheap way to build something that looks cool, and ooh, let's use this material or whatever because I kind of like it. He's designing an experience. So when we think about that, when we reckon with the fact that architects are designing not just a building, but they're designing a kind of experiential, they're designing an experience inside and of a building. Kind of lay out for folks like what parts of Adler's theory we're going to try and kind of connect that to, even just if we could do a little bit of like explaining Adler's theory so we can talk about how that shows up in architecture in terms of plus and minus.
Oh, that's what I was going to say, like the superiority, inferiority stuff. And my brain's going to Mont Saint Michel. Can we go ahead and talk about that?
Oh, well, can you just like give folks a reminder? Like, because some folks might not know Adler's theory. Can you just give a brief overview of inferiority, superiority relationships?
Yeah, so Adler believed that we all are striving for superiority, and I think it's Citra, you said, perfectioning, where we're all trying to, I like to say, like become more complete, and the things that we feel that make us feel inferior or less than, we're going to try and overcompensate and do something to feel better or to strive for excellence in that sense.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes we talk about as moving from a minus to a plus.
Yeah.
And that can be done in a couple ways. This gets us back to Lydia Sitcher, who was a student of Adler's.
So there's vertical and there's horizontal striving. Horizontal is more like rising tides raise all boats, like what helps you helps me, helps the community. Vertical is the Jacob's ladder that you always talk about, where it's like you're climbing up. In order to get up a rung, you have to kick off an angel in order to move up, and that's just not necessarily how it has to be.
Okay, yeah, so two ways of moving from minus to plus. One is to pull others down so that I can be up on top and in power. And then there's another way to move up, which is it's more like progress or perfectioning or moving towards completeness or something like that. And that's let's say that's on the useful, healthy side of life. The other is just puts us in conflict with other people. Okay. Now, you were mentioning Mont Saint Michel. You were just in Normandy, yeah?
I was. And I kind of want to like flash a picture up on.
Oh, we'll throw a picture in here.
We can do that
here's the picture of Mont Saint Michel.
Yeah, it's this, I don't know, the historians, that if they listen to this, they're going to cringe. But it's this island and there's this abbey at the top off the coast of Normandy. And what I loved first about it is like there's this bridge, or I think they call it a causeway, that leads to the island. But the tides vary so much by like 50 feet, I want to say, between low tide and high tide. And when it's low tide, you can walk across and you can have access. But when it's high tide, it's like this little island and you can't get to it. And immediately that makes me think of like superiority, like when things are high, you're striving upward vertically. It's like, well, you isolate yourself and you're kind of an island. And low tide is more, people are welcome. But you've not seen it, but I think I've probably sent you way too many photos of all the views of it. But there's like the abbey at the top, which we were talking yesterday, like, yeah, we could see that as maybe oppressive, to put God or a symbol of God up at the top, but also it gives us something to strive for, because while we're moving from minus to plus, it's goal oriented, and that gives us, I don't know, something greater than ourselves. It doesn't necessarily have to be God, but they're all pointing up, and they're like all the spires, they're triangular and pointed, but they're also layered, so it makes me think of like this community feeling. And the streets are really narrow because we like climbed up. I didn't actually go into the abbey, but because you had to have tickets apparently, but you go through the streets and they're really narrow, so like, and there's like, I wish I could show you, but like there's like a shop here and then like a cafe like right here, so it invites, you have to cooperate, like there's probably like 30-40 people that live in that place, but like everybody has to get along. You could spit and hit the other person, so you kind of have to. But yeah, what are your thoughts on?
Well, I think
and St. Michael, of course, what it's named after.
Oh yeah. So I think there's a few things there. So I think one of the things that we tend to do when we interact with hierarchies, rightfully so, I think now we're having like a cultural moment where we're paying a lot of attention to power dynamics, and we're maybe a little bit more suspicious about hierarchy, right? Yeah. It's like, so if you think about Mont Saint Michel, it's like this conical shape, which pyramidal structure in architecture, it speaks to like a movement toward the heavens, and it's like a pointing upwards towards transcendence. So you see this in a lot of religious structures, and you also see in kind of postmodern, a lot of postmodern architecture, they invert pyramids to like point people back to the earth. And so there's something important about how pyramid shows up.
The Louvre does that as well. It has inside the triangle that like the two triangles meet at this point. I like that.
Which I learned actually that was people, when it got built, they called it an architectural joke. They really did not much care for it, and now it's regarded as this very very important thing. But so you got this kind of I know it's more like a cone, but it's loosely a pyramidal structure, moving from kind of groundedness and then up to this point that orients toward the heavens. And so we see this this kind of hierarchy, and that can be, and I would suspect, I don't know about Mont Saint Michel in particular, but you could make the guess that at times that hierarchy has been used to be oppressive, and I'm glad that we're oriented toward that. But then sometimes what we do is the idea is we're just going to flatten all hierarchy, and there's two problems with flattening hierarchy. One is that we don't do it very well because
Gets real messy.
there are things down inside of us, even just like on a very, very biological level, things that are outside of our conscious awareness that are fundamentally hierarchical. And this this is Adler, right? Like minus to plus, inferiority, superiority. Like there are those dynamics. And the question, rather than trying to shun our own nature, the question is, well, what do we do with that now? Do we use this hierarchy to oppress, or do we use it to orient ourselves toward the transcendent? And for there to be this abbey, which, what's, for folks who might not know, what's an abbey?
It's like a church, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's like
we're monks, and I don't know. It's
with nuns. Yeah, like it's where the nuns are. And it's this place of worship and transcendence, and the idea is that it is this very it's sacred in part because it is even if you think about the Tower of Babel in the Bible, that they build this huge tower, and the idea is that they want to build it so large that they will reach the heavens. Right, and there you've got your your functional pyramidal structure. So there's something about like orienting ourselves toward perfection and towards beauty and transcendence that is helpful and good. Can that be used to oppress? Sure, but can it also be used for progress? Yeah, and there we get to vertical and horizontal striving.
I was going to say something, but now I don't know if it fits. But back to like, it is what you do with it. Like, I think Mont Saint Michel was actually used as a prison during like the French Revolution. Like you can decide what it's used for. Like often it is used as protection, and that's Saint Michael. He's like of battles or warriors. Like the patron saint of like protection or something. But he's often depicted, isn't he, with like a sword and a shield? So it's like, yeah, he's held to a higher standard, but like he still fights, and he shares a personal responsibility. But yeah, it can be used as a fortress or a prison.
Like when you're talking about this, I'm actually thinking of another church that I visited when I was in Spain. In Barcelona, there's this really fantastic neo-Gothic, but also kind of like Art Nouveau cathedral it was designed by an architect, Gaudí is his last name, and it's called La Sagrada Familia. It means the Sacred Family. You
have pictures, so we can...
Okay, and here's a picture of La Sagrada Familia. It has been under construction for well over a century, and it's still not complete. I think they're shooting for... When I visited, I think they were shooting for like 2026 for full completion of the cathedral, but it's been a very, very long time. And there's, so many unbelievable elements of this cathedral that are really, just very, very impressive. Every little detail Gaudí thought out, and it's just, it's a really cool building. But there's this one particular thing in the building that was particularly impactful for me. So in a cathedral, typically one of the things that you have inside the cathedral is a crypt, and typically like very, very important people will be buried there. Sometimes they'll have like a bone of a saint or something or whatever that's kept in a crypt, but they tend to be these kind of dark, dingy places kind of down in the in the belly of the cathedral or whatever.
We've all seen Supernatural. We all know what a crypt looks like.
I hope not. I hope not. So Gaudí did this very, very interesting thing. So you walk into the main cathedral, and it is the scale of it is like it's almost difficult to comprehend how big everything is.
And I've only seen pictures.
Unbelievably tall ceilings, and all these windows with all these different colors with the stained glass. He does some really cool things with colors. But you move toward the crypt, and one of the things that he did is that the crypt it's kind of sunken down to this, below the main floor. But around this the kind of walls of the crypt, there's this opening that opens up into the main thing, so there's like kind of like a railing, and you walk around, but there's this distance in between the railing and the actual wall of the crypt, and so there's this, and what happens is that light from way up in these clerestory windows comes in through the windows and then goes down into the crypt. And the point of this, right, is within Christian theology, there is this understanding of the transcendence of heaven reaching down into the death of the tomb. And the Hebrew word for that is Sheol. It's like the grave, or sometimes people use that, they translate it as hell or something, but it's this like place of death. And the idea that there is this light from heaven that penetrates down into the crypt. It's very special. And so there's something there, right, that it's okay. We've got a plus and a minus, and that there's something about the plus that moves down to the minus, that condescends. And that's, let's say, in a really beautiful way, a piece of Christian theology, Catholic theology, that Gaudí put into stone.
You get to experience it instead
Yeah.
of just, or experience it, but like engage with it.
My memory of, and I could be misquoting this, but Gaudí said that the gospel is, or the Bible is gospel made book, and he wanted his church to be gospel in stone.
And don't the stones kind of look, at least this is just from pictures, but they look like bone.
Well, there's a facade. He has a nativity facade, which is all about the birth of Christ, and then he has
Like the passion.
passion facade, which is very, like, it's a bit frightening to look at. And there's all these sculptures that tell the passion story, and then there are these columns that, rather than being straight up, they look like a rib cage, like a skeletal rib cage. They kind of go out. It's very like deathly. And then there's another facade. I believe it's called the Glory facade, or something like that. And it's the Ascension. And so he's telling these three parts of the story. Anyways, it's just to say that I think that it's certainly for Adlerians, but I also think just as people, when we're in a space, when we're in an architectural space, to look for these dynamics, it makes something about what we're already experiencing real to us.
Yes.
Meaning that it's not like, there's this other article that or it's not an article, it's a chapter of a book that I really love, where he observes the relationship between cathedral design, Christian cathedral design, and the modern shopping mall. They share all the same architectural features.
Interesting.
And so, like, if you walk through a shopping mall, you've got these windows, right? And they've got these mannequins dressed up. Those are the icons of the... those are icons. That's what they are. In all these little stations, right? Like all through the shopping mall. And so then you start to think about it. It's like, okay, well, if we think of the Eucharist as kind of the epitome of the function of a cathedral, this is where there's this, Eucharistic moment. What you think about what the Eucharistic moment of the shopping mall is, and it is the purchase of consumer goods. And so to see that the shopping mall, and by the way, I'm not trying to dunk on shopping malls or something, but to see and experience that a shopping mall is a cathedral of consumerism. That's what it is.
That's what it seems like. Now I'm not going to be able to unsee that if I go to a shopping mall. Thank you.
Well, yeah.
As I eat my pretzel bites.
You can thank
Indians.
James K.A. Smith for that. It's his fault. He did the same for me. Changed my mind about shopping malls. So in essence, what I'm trying to say here is that to be mindful about the meaning of architecture, and I don't think that we have to be architectural theorists to do this. Mm-hmm. You and I aren't architectural theorists, but to notice these
more than me. But to notice, to know, and especially like some of these holier places. But it's like you get this chance to align yourself with the natural order of things, because that's what they're connecting to usually, and then you get to figure out what your place in it is, like where you belong, which is super Adlerian. And that's what I do when I go into any space. I'm like, how do I fit here? What is the story that I tell myself, and how does this make sense to me? And that's why every place is beautiful to me and makes me cry when I go into a church.
And I think particularly for plus and minus dynamics, that we would be aware of those things, and again, not with the goal of absolutely flattening hierarchies. Listen, do some hierarchies need to be flattened out a little bit, and make it made a little bit less steep? Sure. And I'm on board with that, but also to recognize, okay, somewhere there's going to be some kind of pyramidal experience here. There's going to be a hierarchical experience, but are we engaging this in a vertical way or in a horizontal way, where we're perfectioning, where we're moving towards progress? We maintain our courage to be imperfect, but we're moving towards something transcendent and good and beautiful, or is this a superiority over others kind of way of relating? I think those are things worth thinking about. And
I also see it as a matter of like mutual respect, and this is just me being super Adlerian extra with it, but like walking in, I want to know how it affects me, because that helps me turn towards myself, which is respectful, and then it helps me appreciate all the things that went into building and constructing it, and that's respect right back. So it's, I don't know, that's not probably why I do it, but let's say that that's why I do it. It makes me sound better.
Well, thank you so much for listening to our very nerdy conversation today, and let us know.
We can do more buildings, more.
Yeah.
Statue of Liberty. Or,
yeah. Even if you had a building that you think is a little bit interesting and that you'd
or your
be
house.
interested in, or something like that, we'd be interested in talking a little bit about that, or and even just listening. To see what you have to say. But we appreciate your time and attention. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.